Speaker make it clear.
Order. Well, I did not make the comment.
Bill is not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Good, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my ever-revolving panel of bloggers and opinion shapers, here's the political columnist for the NBR, consultant, commentator and moral shepherd of the right, Matthew Hooton. And here's an author, a columnist and political commentator, proof the revolution will be televised, blogger Chris Trotter. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1, how much more delusional could solid energy possibly get, and who will be held accountable? Issue 2, has Shane Jones been cleared by the Auditor General the way John Key was cleared by the Deputy Auditor General? And issue 3 tonight, Len Brown goes from 15,000 homes ready to build down to 2,000. When will Auckland's housing get affordable? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off tonight with issue 1. The government began the week thrilled with their win in the Supreme Court and was enjoying rubbing the opposition's face in the fact that 290,000 New Zealanders have expressed interest in buying Mighty River Power shares. Then came the embarrassing revelation that Solid Energy was told to borrow more by the government. This news came hard on the heels of Campbell Live's investigation into the delusional fantasies of valuation Solid Energy convinced themselves of. That saw them self-valued at over $3 billion, down to the almost $400 million loss they are now recording. Matthew, National's meme of being the better economic manager, it's in the toilet now, isn't it?
I don't think the performance of Solid Energy makes any difference one way or the other about the government's economic management. Certainly there's been a commercial fiasco here that's been many years in the development, and you know, we've all lost money as a result. It's worse than the 400 million, of course, because the company was making profits, which it was pouring into these sort of weird and wonderful investments that they thought were going to transform and save the planet and so forth. But I don't think it says much. I think you can criticise the government for lack of oversight. Yep. You can criticise the Treasury. It used to be called the Crown Company Monitoring Unit. It's now called something else. You can criticise them for their lack of oversight, but it's a commercial matter, not an economic one.
Well, Solid Energy went from borrowing 13 million in 2009 to an eye-watering 191 million in 2010 and borrowed 313 million last year with no oversight or business case for most of it. How much responsibility does Treasury need?
It goes back to when Trevor Mallard was State-Owned Enterprise Minister in 2007, and the Labor government had this policy that not a single share in any SOE could ever be sold. And they had this portfolio of SOEs that was coming up to be worth $100 billion or something like that, and it was more than the New Zealand Stock Exchange, the market capitalisation of the New Zealand Stock Exchange. And so what the Labor government rightly observed was if the New Zealand economy was to grow quickly, it was just as important, well, even more important, what happened with the state-owned enterprises in terms of their growth rates, which was about 2% a year, compared with what was happening on the New Zealand Stock Exchange. So Trevor Mallard encouraged them to be entrepreneurial. He said he wanted them to set up joint ventures and invest in new businesses that could then later be developed and sold and so forth. And they did that. And the other thing that was going on at the time, of course, was Helen Clark wanted New Zealand to be the first carbon neutral country. So the SOEs, the energy ones, including Solid Energy, were told, oh, invest in clean, green energy and biofuels and biochar and whatever. And so Solid Energy went out and did that. And then they got a new government that said, we want you to be more aggressive with your balance sheets and borrow. And they also said, we've got a fiscal crisis here, so we want higher dividends. And I think all these factors came together, combined with delusional management, to cause the company's crash.
Chris, the right will claim this is an example of why the state shouldn't run these assets, but how much steeper will electricity prices rise with private owners demanding more profits?
Well, I mean, this is a problem that the left has. If you look back over the performance of the energy companies under state ownership over the past decade and a bit, I mean, the price of electricity has steadily increased. Most of that increase under Labor. This is because, as they're currently configured, these are profit-seeking, profit-making, hopefully, not in the case of Solid Energy, but hopefully, and indeed in the case of the generators, you know, they are indeed very profitable. And so the situation that prevailed before corporatisation, when all of our generation was under the control of the electricity department, New Zealanders enjoyed some of the cheapest electricity on the face of the planet, because that's what it was designed to produce. Electricity which didn't cost the country anything, in as much as it came from the sky in the form of rain, and energy which was cheap and abundant, not only for the domestic consumer but for industry. But we haven't run government-owned and operated entities like that since the mid-1980s. So to me, you know, whether these things are in private or public ownership, if they're under that SOE model, I really don't care.
Do you think that the politicians actually have any control over these enterprises any longer? I mean,
Well,
this week's been pretty
they do.
appalling
They
to
do if they
build it.
choose to exercise it. But of course, you know, the kind of informal consensus between the two major parties is that you don't involve yourself in the running of SOEs. I mean, why have them? Why set them up in that way? If you want to have a hand in the way electricity is priced and the way you generate it and how much you generate, then go back to the way things were in the 60s and 70s.
Matthew, how effective has Labor's response to asset sales been? Because David Shearer won't confirm that he'll buy them back or he won't buy them back if they're sold. Is Labor confused by its own position?
Well, of course, a Labor government wouldn't buy back these shares. I mean, we are in this case only talking about a minority stake. The government would remain the cornerstone shareholder with 51%. Super Fund would probably own another 10%, ACC another 10%. So, you know, if you were a Labor government, are you going to increase teachers' pay or buy shares in Mighty River Power? Well, if you're going to increase teachers' pay, it's obvious. And for 9 years of the Helen Clark government, you know, not a single share in Contact Energy was purchased back. I mean, Contact Energy owns the Clyde Dam, it owns the Wairaki geothermal network. These are strategic assets, whatever that ridiculous phrase means. In fact, no one ever says what it means. But Helen Clark chose not to buy a single share back in that company because it wasn't a priority. She had massive surpluses. She didn't know what to do with them. It became a political problem. Had Helen Clark wanted to buy Contact Energy back, she could have, but she chose not to. Why would she? But why would she? Because it's all nonsense.
It's
all
worse
nonsense.
even
Who
than that.
cares who owns these companies?
If you looked at the price of the shares of Kiwi Rail, there was a point when the government could have purchased the entire company for about $250 million instead of the close to
a few hours welfare payments
that it ended up paying for it. I mean, in that sense, Matthew is quite right. The government of the day, the Labor government of the day, was happy to preserve the SOE model. Now, when things got a bit sticky, as they did, for example, in Air New Zealand, I remember being at a conference where I think it was the Engineers Union who had most of the members at Air New Zealand, said to Trevor Mallard, who was the SOE minister, look, Trevor, you've got to do something. And Trevor told them the facts of life. I can't. You know, this is a private company. It has to be run according to you know, the rules of business. And I would have to completely change the structure of the company before I was legally entitled to intervene.
One of the issues with Air New Zealand when it wasn't private ownership was that it was looking for international partners, and there was talks with Singapore Airlines, and there was talks, I think, with one of the Middle Eastern, the Gulf States airlines, either Etihad or Emirates, and for political reasons, Michael Cullen and the Labor government didn't want to see foreign investment going into Air New Zealand. They didn't want, so they never facilitated that investment, and that then led Air New Zealand to do stupid things like buy Ansett that led to that fiasco. So,
Yes.
so the Air New Zealand case is is quite separate. I mean, if it was any other business, the government wouldn't have intervened in the way it was, but it was felt that New Zealand, for tourism and marketing and other reasons, needs a national airline, so the government bailed it out. If it had been making, you know, Barbie dolls, it wouldn't have been.
Final question to both of you. Solid Energy didn't answer question to Parliament's Commerce Committee, yet 48 hours later, we're giving those answers on Campbell Live. Do we need a full inquiry here?
Oh, I don't think so. I think Clayton Cosgrove is getting a little overexcited in relation to this. And besides, as the Prime Minister himself admitted to Fran O'Sullivan, what Solid Energy was trying to do wasn't all crazy. Not by any stretch of the imagination.
Not going to get a full inquiry?
I think we'll learn enough through the media and so forth. But I would say with both Solid Energy and Mighty River Power, their performance with the Select Committee, Mighty River Power, is absolutely appalling. The Select Committee had a whole lot of questions for them and they didn't answer them, and they said, oh, they weren't phrased right. Well, actually, and everyone said, oh, this is them getting ready for privatisation. I'll tell you what, when they're private shareholders, you think of Contact Energy, they're majority owned, the Clyde Dam and so forth, majority owned by Australian investors. If Origin Energy asks the management of Contact Energy about how the company's going, I bet they answer it.
That's true.
And I'm surprised that Mighty River Power, it's only got one shareholder. If the shareholder asks questions, you bloody answer them, and it's outrageous behaviour.
Yeah, and that's the question to address. I mean, contempt of Parliament is always there as a big stick to bash people who treat...
And so is the Companies Act.
Yeah, treat select committees and that.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2, the Auditor General has handed out very blunt criticism of Shane Jones' handling of the citizenship case for a questionable Chinese national, but it has found no direct corruption in the way the Deputy Auditor General found no direct corruption in the pokies for Convention Centre deal. Chris, Labour's front bench is very white for a party of diversity. They have to have Shane Jones back on the front bench, don't they?
No, they don't. And I think the Auditor General's report on the Bill Yu affair was always going to be as much a test of David Shearer's leadership capacity as it was of Associate Immigration Minister Shane Jones's handling of the actual citizenship application. If you read that document, it is crystal clear that Shane Jones should never again be allowed within a bull's roar of ministerial decision making. It was fraught with all kinds of errors of judgment, mistakes. There was just no evidence there of a person who really knew what was required of a Minister of Immigration, knew what was required in this case. Bill Yu was friends with the Minister of Immigration. He was friends with Dover Samuels. Money had been donated. For God's sake, if ever there was a case that didn't pass the political sniff test, this was it. But Shane Jones just let it go through. And Shearer should have demonstrated some moral bloody fibre and said, no way, Shane. I know we're a little light on brown faces, but you're not coming back.
Matthew, despite the clearing of John Key, Labour claimed dodgy deals done dirt cheap. Is taking Jones back a huge double standard?
I think the Shane Jones, Bill Liu situation is on a totally different level from John Key's hands-on management of the Convention Centre issue. You know, I don't like things like the Convention Centre deal or the MediaWorks deal or the Warner Brothers deal because I'm a right-winger. But the New Zealand people believe in hands-on government, and that's what John Key has been doing with Sky City, exactly as the voters want.
And that's what David Shearer keeps saying.
Yes, he should do more.
So New Zealand, hands-on government.
The Bill Liu thing, I think that we should probably be careful here, but let's suffice it to say everyone's lied in unison, haven't they?
Right, right.
I mean, it's not just, Chris portrayed Shane Jones as an idiot. He's not an idiot. It's not that he didn't know what his responsibilities as a minister were, it's that he knew what was required of him politically to a major donor.
Right. And that comes that brings me to the next question.
Anywhere
I'd like
else,
to run both of you.
that sort of behaviour would go by a very different name.
Oh, no, in Western Australia, it'd be just run of the mill. You know, I mean, Queensland, wouldn't be a big deal at all.
Yeah, Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
How does this look?
20 Chicago.
How does this look? A major donor to the Labour Party suddenly gains citizenship. What's the? I mean, does the perception?
Mr. Liu's advocates.
What's his name?
Well, good question.
Different names.
Today
yes.
it's Bill Liu.
Yeah.
His advocates and advisors knew that he had been awarded citizenship before the Department of Immigration was told. Within days, he was being presented with his citizenship papers in Parliament, with Dover Samuels beaming and applauding like a proud father at the birth.
It's the dodgiest thing I've ever heard of.
Really?
You know, in our political situation, where it is the dodgiest thing I've ever heard of. We will accept the report and its conclusions, and those who were accused have done an excellent job in their defence.
Yes.
But let's cut to the chase. This was the worst thing that I've ever heard of in following New Zealand politics. It's funny, people who have been in Parliament since 1984, when they first became young backbenchers, they say, oh, well, the big issue at the time was whether you could get a phone. And backbench MPs in their constituency clinics would have these constituents say, oh, can you pull some strings because I want a phone, because it used to take under the post office in the socialist New Zealand, it used to take sort of 3 months to get a phone.
Not quite that long.
Right.
But
it was the main issue that used to come through constituency offices. That backbench MPs report today, it's immigration. And I think, and that's because it's the last thing where there's ministerial discretion.
Right.
And I think that it's ridiculous that usually the Associate Minister of Immigration has this last word on these things, because it creates, well, let's not say Shane Jones was corrupt, but it creates that type of risk.
Perception.
The other problem with immigration, of course, is that very often the people who are coming from countries where gratuities and rewards for services rendered are as common as air. In fact, they wouldn't expect anything else. So to put our politicians kind of in front of such people with such expectations is, in my view, very foolish.
What now for Shane Jones?
Well, you've got to say, what a survivor. I mean, he's upset all the males in New Zealand.
Yeah.
From what he revealed about what happens on business trips in hotel rooms, and as one media commentator said, for goodness sake, why didn't he use his laptop like everyone else? So that was his masturbation issue. I mean, amazing. Imagine a politician surviving using taxpayers' money to buy porn, especially when they had a laptop and it would have been free. And then
couldn't happen in America.
No, I mean, he survived
no way on earth.
No one even talks about it anymore.
An American politician could come back from something.
I think women had other objections to what he was doing, but there you go. But and now this, and he's on the front bench of the Labour Party, and as looks quite possible, David Shearer becomes Prime Minister, he'll be on the front bench of the New Zealand government as a senior minister. Amazing.
Final question here: Is this Shane Jones' last chance?
No, I don't think so. No, not at all. I mean, if his track record's anything to go by, he's got plenty more lives. He's the sort of politician that gives a cat paws. They've got 9. How many?
I mean, his house was raided by the police when he was deputy chairman of the Treaty of Waitangi Fisheries Commission because of stolen and leaked documents. The police were searching for them. I mean, he became an MP and he was on the Prime Ministry Select Committee, and he remained chairman of the Treaty of Waitangi Fisheries Commission. No one seemed to care. There's the porn. It just goes on and on.
It's a sign, I think, of the factional gridlock within Labour.
Right, and their lack of Maori talent, which I mean, the Labour Party basically, Helen Clark used to work with Ngātata Love, who was one of her close friends. He was from Te Puni Kokiri, and she was looking for what she wanted to be talented Maori, and she got all these loser TPK regional managers that ended up standing for Labour, and all the talented Maori
international
went into either the Maori Party, now Mana, now the National Party, and Labour has these absolute dimwits. I mean, poor old, what's her name, the one that Nanaima Hooton,
Hooton.
I mean, hopeless, you know, and there was Reno Tirakatne's useless, and it just goes on. And so if you're Labour, you do want a Maori on the front bench, and he's all they've got.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3. Last week, Len Brown was telling Nick Smith that there were 15,000 sections ready to be built upon. This week, it turns out that figure is only 2,000. The government claimed that urban sprawl from here to Hamilton is the solution, but it's more supply and demand free market rhetoric what is needed to cool Auckland's hot property market. Matthew, Selwyn Manning blogged this week that the interventionist solutions to housing affordability are outside the ideological paradigm of Nick Smith. Is that true?
I've got no idea what
I was going to say.
postmodernist nonsense means.
Can Nick Smith reach across the intellectual divide and do something for Auckland that's going to be a little bit more intervention?
This is such a difficult issue, and all these people that say, you know, reckon they've got the answer are just lying to us. When I was a young boy growing up in Auckland, everybody, wealthy or poor, had basically a quarter-acre section. And now, the backyard that kids used to play rugby and cricket has a townhouse on it. And so Auckland sort of doubled as a result of that process. We've reached the end of that. There's no possibility of further subdivision in Auckland, really. So we could go up in the CBD, or we can go out, which is what it seems Nick Smith and Len Brown and Don Brash all seem to agree on. We should go out. But, you know, you can't make houses cheaper by wishing it to be so. And then you get stupid ideas like building so-called affordable housing down at the Wynyard Quarter. Well, you know, who are the 50 families who are going to get these $100,000 apartments that are worth $2 million? I mean, are we really going to start...
Friends of Shane Jones.
Are we really going to start allocating property through ballot rather than through the price mechanism? Because that's the question.
Yeah.
That's the price mechanism people are concerned about because it makes it difficult for people to buy property. But I haven't heard of a better mechanism.
Chris, if you mention the issue of Chinese nationals being able to buy up residential property, the debate quickly gets drowned out by claims of xenophobia. Certainly Grey Power found out that this week. But should we be allowing foreigners to become residential land bankers in New Zealand?
Well, it's very hard to stop them without not only giving the appearance of xenophobia and racism, but probably quite likely the substance as well.
You can't buy land in China unless you're a national.
Well, no, but China has a whole lot of things you can't do. I'm not
Like run and have a TV program.
Well, that's right. It criticises the Chinese Communist Party. So, you know, I mean, I know what Selwyn was driving at, and he's quite right. And it's not just National Party cabinet ministers that have difficulty in thinking outside this particular box that we have in relation to housing. I think it's Labour as well. You know, what needs to be done is that the state needs to step back and say, is it really intelligent policy to go on cramming people into Auckland? Or shouldn't we take a leaf out of planners from the past and perhaps start building you know, urban centres away from Auckland? Perhaps we should redirect industry to these new areas. This has happened in the past.
To rebuild the provinces.
We very nearly had a planned city of Rolleston, and would have had if Robert Muldoon hadn't bulldozed Labour off the political landscape in such fine style in 1975, because Labour was getting ready to build this satellite city of Rolleston. But it's that sort of thinking that's needed, because without it, then, you know, the pressures in Auckland can't help but drive up the price. And if you try and put artificial controls on the price, you know, in one area, it'll leak out into other areas. I mean, I remember when Muldoon had his freeze on everything, wages, prices, interest rates. Well, you know, people just went to their lawyers who arranged money for them by other means,
right,
and they managed to buy their houses anyway.
Yep.
Without resorting to sort of Chinese government tax.
I mean,
What
what
do you
Chris
do?
has talked about is extremely big picture. You know, the state deciding there'll be new cities here or there, which is, at least has some integrity to it. The idea you can control the price of housing in basically central Auckland as a government is self-evidently ridiculous.
So Nick Smith's out
not
of
only
his depth?
Not only that, I'm not even sure it'd be politically popular because, you know,
wouldn't.
I don't know about you. I mean, what happens in this city, unfortunately, from an economic perspective, is we all do a little bit of work on the side and we try and get rich through house price inflation.
Through capital gain.
Right.
And the New Zealand Herald publishes that big supplement
Yeah.
every 3
And
months.
everyone
you're
grabs
rich.
it.
And in my suburb, the average house has gone up by 20% in the
Everyone feels
last
rich.
in the
And I'll
last
tell you
12
what.
months. And that, I'll tell you what, that means I've earned more from that
Yes.
than from any other
I
activity I do.
read Dick Quacks, Councillor Dick Quacks'
Yeah.
piece in the Herald the other day, and believe me, he will have got more purchase with
Yeah.
his piece than Penny Hulse will have got with hers.
So
Really?
The idea that you've just spent every cent you could amass on your little house and you've got your outlook, and then some bugger comes along, puts a 6-story townhouse right in your sightline, that ain't going to go
Labor
very
and Nationals
well.
be very careful because the politician that starts telling Aucklanders they're going to reduce the value of their houses is
It's over.
Not
It's
good,
over.
not
for them,
good.
right? So,
Let's wrap the show with a final word. Chris, your final word this week is?
Well, I have a very large brickbat to hurl at the College of Cardinals. The Petrine succession has landed upon the shoulders of a person by the name of Jorge Mario Bergoglio, who 40 or so years ago just happened to be hand in glove with the military junta that terrorized Argentina between 1976 and 1983. I mean, Hugh O'Shaughnessy, a British journalist, has written about this in The Guardian. A guy called Jabitsky, I think, in Argentina, has written about it. This is not a good look. O'Shaughnessy writes this wonderfully ironic paragraph where he talks about what a scandal it would be if a person with this background were to be elevated to the papacy. Lo and behold, what happens today? He's elevated to the papacy.
well, look, I too am very angry with the College of Cardinals.
Your final word?
Well, this week I've been working, it's the most fun I've had since I was hammering into Helen Clark over the emissions trading scheme and vehicle emissions. I've been working on the car park tax with basically the entire New Zealand business community, all the unions, all the advertisers, in fact everyone except
Everyone.
the government.
Everyone.
And,
We've managed to get everyone on
It's
board.
been such wonderful fun. And we were just about today to announce our latest hit on the government. And the College of Cardinals elected a pope, and we've lost the front pages for today. But
And tomorrow,
I think, and tomorrow, and it has, as I say, it's been fun. But Colin Espenar has said on Stuff how this could be the national government's light bulb or showerhead moment. It is so stupid to start saying you're going to tax people's car parks in this particular city, Auckland. It doesn't raise any revenue. It's been the easiest PR job I've ever had to mock and discredit the government over something so stupid. I'm surprised they haven't backed down. I think they will next week.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Matthew. Ladies and gentlemen, my final word. Rainbow smoke poured out of Parliament last night as marriage equality passed its second reading. New Zealand got one step closer to entering the 21st century. Now, New Zealand seems to have gotten over our petty hatred of gay marriage. How about decriminalising medicinal cannabis? Last year, Stephen McIntyre was intimidated and bullied into suicide by police who threatened him with further charges after he was arrested at Green Cross, Auckland, a medicinal cannabis clinic. That case is now with IPCA and is under investigation, but the loss of his life will not have been in vain if we can now progress this debate and force a reasoned position on our ridiculous and draconian cannabis laws. People who are ill and seeking medicinal cannabis are not criminals, and they should not be treated as such. If we can come together to see the farce of a cultural sacred cow like gay marriage, then can't we also take another step already walked by America and decriminalise medicinal cannabis? If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand